Hello and welcome to Basic Computer Help. Today I'm actually going to be talking about how to test a computer's power supply, most notably a desktop computer. Pretty much looks like one of these. It's usually actually physically inside the computer. The first thing I'm going to recommend is check the back of the computer. If it has an on-off switch, that's actually good. Make sure it's off before you start. If it doesn't, find a power strip or some kind of power tap device that has an on-off switch on it. As you're setting this thing up to be tested, you don't want to have the opportunity to turn the power supply on. And it's actually going to be very easy to accidentally do if it can receive power. So first thing is to make sure it's off. Plug it in. Now you can do all of this with it still in the computer. You're going to want to disconnect the power from all the important stuff. Your motherboard, disconnect all power from that. Also, if you have a video card, a separate video card with power attached to it, definitely unplug that. If you don't, they can be destroyed. Unplug your hard drives and CD-ROM drives. I actually have two power supply testers. This is the one I showed in one of my previous videos. As you can see, it actually tests all the power supply rails at the particular time this was out. And then I have this one, which is a more modern one. It's got an LCD display. It can test the 20+4 pin connectors, which are common in all new computers now. And it can test a lot of the peripheral powers, most notably the 4-plug which is this plug that's in your power supply. It's usually just two yellows and two blacks. It usually powers your processor itself. Whereas this one only does the 20 pin. Currently that's okay because the way the 20+4 works is you plug the extra 4 pins in and then you plug the 20 pin part in next to it. Also, an important note why I got another one of these. I originally thought that this went bad. I'll show you when I test it. It'll read that this brand new power supply, which I know perfectly well is good, it'll say it is bad. That is because it tests the -5-volt rail, and I don't know if you can read the... No, I've had this for a while, so... Nah, you can't. It tests the -5-volt rail, which is not found in power supplies anymore. They started phasing them out back in, I want to say 2003, and are kind of harder to find now. My local computer store can get me a power supply with a -5-volt rail on special order. It's just because if your computer runs Windows Vista or newer, and it came with Windows XP Service Pack 1A, odds are you don't need the -5 volts anymore. So I'll actually show you it failing on this one. A common technique that I do is I leave the fans plugged in. So any fans that it has plugged in directly to your power supply, I leave them plugged in. The reason behind that is that if it can't power the fans and this, which actually uses less power than your motherboard, then it's not a good power supply. I've also left CD-ROM drives plugged in at the same. Also, if you ever choose to leave a CD-ROM or a floppy disk drive plugged into the power, disconnect its data cable. The reason for that is it usually only occurs on very cheap setups. But the reason for that is your motherboard can actually attempt to pull power through the data connectors, which will burn out your CD-ROM and hard drives. So, as you saw as I was explaining that, I plugged this in. Now I'm going to turn it on. As you see, the red light came on, which is reading danger. That's because as you see, the one light that's not on is the -5 volt light, negative 5 volt rail. I'll shut that off. And I'll actually show you. Well, I'll try to show you. I don't know if this camera will pick it up too good. If you look right there, come on, focus. There we go. If you look right there, you'll see there's an empty spot. A lot of brand new power supplies come with that empty spot. That is where the negative 5 volts would have gone. That's usually the only one that uses negative 5 volts. This one, I usually use the same techniques as the other one, leave a fan plugged in. One thing I like about this is not only does it also test the extra stuff like the +4 and the +6 pin, but it'll also test the floppy disk, the 8-pin one, and then a 4-pin, but it'll also test the floppy disk 6-pin plug. It's got one for serial ATA power, and come on, open up. One for your standard Molex power connectors. So I'll show you how to hook it up. Just a warning though, when you plug into the serial ATA, it is extremely common, not common, but it is extremely easy to plug it in upside down with the way that is actually set up. So I don't actually plug it in. You can short it out. Well, not you can, you will short out your power supply doing that. So I usually do it just like this. Plug in one over here. Definitely make sure it's off. Now, since I'm also going to test where the floppy disk drive goes into, I'm actually going to try to find it on a different strand than the original one that I plugged in. There. Now for the +4 CPU plug, it'll usually only go in one spot. Just to let you guys also know, it's pretty well labeled if you read the front of it, what each plug does, which one plugs into where. That way, if you know how to read it, you won't plug anything in the wrong spot. This one's also more designed for the professional, as it's kind of not error-proof. And I like that, because usually the error-proof ones get in your way. But then again, sometimes the plugs can get in your way. This is fairly new, so everything's stiff. Alright. Everything is plugged in. I will turn it on. Alright, I'm back. I had to figure out why it wasn't turning on. I had actually plugged in the +4 pin on upside down. It is actually very easy to do that on a lot of testers. And if I recall, it's actually fairly easy to do that on a lot of motherboards too. A quick way to do it is, if you see that there's writing on it, it's like that one has, focus, P1 and then +4 over here, you're going to want the writing to be on the same side. So, that's ensure. Like I said, I try to make sure that I got at least one out of every chain plugged in. Now I'm going to turn it on. It's reading good on the +12 and the +5 volt. Let's see what it reads for the 3.3 volts is reading at 3.4 volts. 5 volts is at 5.1. 12 volts is at 11.8 volts. 5 volt SB at 5.2, which is more of a, it tests the 5 volt rail. Plus 12 volt 1 is at 12.0. Minus 12. The only thing is a plus 12 plus 12 V2, which is a redundant 12 volt power supply, comes back as failed. That's because this particular power supply does not have a redundant 12 volt rail. It actually shares the same 12 volt rail over what would normally be a second 12 volt rail. It's because it's a cheap power supply. It's not a really good one. This is actually only, I believe it's 350 watt. No, it's a 300 watt power supply. I got it to replace the power supply in somebody's computer that had a power supply failure, only to find out that it took out their motherboard with it. So, I hope this answered some questions. Sometimes that'll pop out. It just pops right back in. So, until the next video, see you later.